Last week we saw that Saul began to take his attempts at David's life. And this is going to continue and roll forward, not just in this chapter, but as the story goes on, this is going to be a theme. David's on the run now. So as we come to this chapter, we'll just have 4 points and then 4 applications. Our 4 points will be, first, that David was warned by Jonathan. Secondly, that he was walled, or the spear was, I'm trying to do W's here so they all walled. The spear went in the wall. Third, he was windowed, let out the window. And then fourthly, that he worshipped with Samuel the prophet and the prophets there. So warned, walled, windowed, worship, that's a story. So first, he was warned. Saul has moved away from his passive technique. He wished the Philistines would kill him, or that his daughter would drive him crazy in the marriage, or whatever. But now Saul is beginning to be more direct, and so he's actually commanding his servants and his son to kill David, which he does in verse 1. Jonathan stands up for David. We saw last chapter that after he killed Goliath, that him and Jonathan became best buds. Bros, besties for life. And so Jonathan warns David about what's coming, so David flees. And then Jonathan speaks to his father Saul and convinces him not to kill David. And his reasoning was, look, man, David's done nothing against you. In fact, he's done a bunch of stuff for you. What David's doing benefits you as well. We've seen that. God's grace to Saul. He gave him a predecessor that wasn't against him or kicking him when he's down, but actually was serving him and blessing him. A real Christ figure there. So he took his life in his own hands and slayed the Philistine and brought all this victory to Israel. And why would you do this? And Saul sees as a moment of clarity. And so he swears, as the Lord lives, David shall not be put to death. Now, that doesn't last very long, all right? So, but anyway, it worked for the time being, so Jonathan goes and gets David, brings him back to the palace, and he's serving Saul just like he was before that. What does that mean? That means he's going out to war, but he's also still playing the lyre in the royal chambers to soothe Saul when he gets in his maddened states that is given to him from the Lord. So, he's warned, but he comes back. So Saul's oath not to kill David doesn't last very long, because David goes out to war again, great victory and success, and then he comes back playing the lyre. And as Saul's sitting there, he's twirling his spear or whatever, and he can't do it. I know I swore that I wouldn't do this, but I just can't handle it. This guy just went out and obliterated the Philistines. Once again, the people are cheering for him. They probably say now, Saul has slayed his thousands and David his millions. That's probably what they're saying now. So, can't handle it. All the meanwhile, David's literally serving him, playing the sweet tunes, trying to soothe him, not working. So he throws the spear at him again. So this is either the second or third time this happens. So David's just dodging those things like Neo in the Matrix. It's just keep happening. This time he misses him again, but the spear sticks into the wall, and David escapes. The church father Gregory of Nyssa, he's one of the Cappadocian fathers, he sees a wonderful figure of the cross here. That the spear represents the cross, is the combination of wood and iron, and that the wall represents the human nature of Christ, and that David represents the divine nature of Christ. In other words, Christ was killed by the cross in his human nature, and then his divine nature, though, escaped, and he rose from the dead. Pretty good. So, anyways, David escapes, and this time he goes home to his wife, and he's hoping that maybe Saul will cool out. Notice one thing David has not done: retaliate. He's not looking to do that. He could easily do that. He's obviously the man. But he doesn't. It hasn't even crossed his mind to take vengeance on Saul. He respects Saul. He honors him. He sees him as the Lord's anointed. That's what he calls him. So he's honoring the office he's in, and probably has a personal love for Saul, David being a godly man. So it's just such a contrast between Saul and David here. Anyway, so that he was walled. Third, when he's home, Saul sends messengers now to surround his house. And so Michal, his wife, must have been in and out or noticed the guys out there, so she warns David that as soon as you get up tomorrow and leave the house, you're going to be struck down. So you need to get out tonight to save your life. So she lowers him out the window in a basket. Pretty sweet. This happened to the Apostle Paul as well. Actually, when very first time he started preaching Christ, the very first time there was a rage. They wanted to kill him, so they lowered him out the window in a basket. So it's a common theme, I guess. Pretty good. So she lowers him out the back window, and he's able to flee. And she's got a little trick up her sleeve, so she must have seen Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, and she said, so she puts this household image in the bed to make it look like David's in there, and got this goat's hair pillow that just perfectly matches David's shade of hair, so it's just a perfect match. And so sets this up to make it look like maybe this was the first time in history this had ever been done. I don't know, but so she's got a plan. She's sticking up just like Jonathan is defending David. Michal is defending David. Remember, these are Saul's own children. So the Lord's really got some defenses up for David. So she says, Saul sends for him. She said, well, he's sick. He's not feeling so good. So, okay. Maybe Saul's thinking, well, maybe he'll die from the sickness. But after a few minutes, that's not going to happen. He tells his guys to go back and just carry the whole bed to me and I'll kill him. And when they get in there, they're like the Nazgul, and they see that these are not hobbits. This is not the David you're looking for. He's long gone. So they tell Saul. Saul rages, calls in his daughter and says, what's up, yo? Why have you aided my enemy? And Michal says, well, he threatened me and told me, why should I kill you? You better let me go. So Michal here, even though she's for David, she will turn against David, as we'll see. So don't know if she's just playing both sides here or whatever. In any case, David escapes. And this time he dips out for real. He goes, leaves Jerusalem, leaves the whole city, and he goes and flees to be with Samuel. So this is the fourth W that he worshipped. It says in verse 18, he escaped, he came to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. This is probably a sweet relationship here between David and Samuel. We don't see much of that maybe, but he spent extended time here with him. And you remember that David also is a prophet. In the New Testament he's called that. In the Psalms, as he's worshiping God, he's also prophesying. He does make actual prophecies too of the coming of the Christ and his resurrection, certainly his crucifixion on the cross. David peered into the mysteries of the gospel and set them forth in those ancient songs of Israel. And so maybe, he's rubbing shoulders with Samuel and the prophets here. A reminder from before that when the prophets are prophesying here, this is probably a worshiping type of prophecy. They're singing, they're playing music, and they're worshiping God and prophesying his glories that way. So that's what kind of thing's going on here. Remember, it's the little band from Avatar: Last Airbender, Secret Tunnels. If you know, you know. That's what they're doing. So it's cool to think about David here. He's already been playing the harp out in the fields by night, worshiping God, but now it's a jam session with the other prophets in Israel. And Samuel's pouring into him, no doubt. Samuel's pouring wisdom into young David. David's already godly, he already has wisdom and knowledge, but he wants more. That's a mark of being a wise person, is that you want more and more, and you listen and submit to more. So he's really being blessed here, I'm sure, by Samuel. So when Saul hears about it, he sends more soldiers to go get him. And the soldiers here, he's in Naoth, that may be like sort of like a shepherd's camp, a little out there. And so they find out where David is, they go, they find him, but when they get there and they see all the prophets prophesying and Samuel's there leading, they can't resist. The Spirit of God comes upon them. And instead of arresting David, they join in worshiping God with the prophets. So Saul eventually sends more guys, a second round of messengers. And when they get there, maybe they heard about this. They said, we're going to do this. We're not going to fall for this. We're not going to be taken in or corrupted here. But as soon as they get there, they join in the party as well. Now they're singing and worshiping God. And so Saul sends a third round. And of course, those guys as well join in the festivities of prophesying God's glories and worshiping him. So finally Saul gets fed up and goes himself. And as he's going, to him it seems to happen before he even gets there. The Spirit of God comes upon Saul. The Spirit's been taken from him as a king, as the anointed one, but here the Spirit is back on him and disarming him. So he's prophesying, he's trying to, he's like halfway through the transformation as he's going there. Half of them still determined to arrest and kill David, but then, his mouth, he can't control it. He starts singing these praises, His hand starts moving with the tambourine action. So, and by the time he gets there, he too is prophesying fully. So it's a really cool way that the Lord defended David. We'll consider it in the applications a little bit. And it ends by saying that Saul stripped his clothes and was naked. Now, naked in the Old Testament here doesn't necessarily mean naked, all right? Probably means took off his outer garments, maybe took his shirt off, which would not have been common, So, removed some articles of clothing, but not indecent, probably. But anyway, he's the king. He's royally robed. But when he gets there, all those things are off, and he's worshiping before the Lord in a rowdy, kind of primal way. Remember, David does this too. That's why Michal doesn't dig it when they bring the ark back into Jerusalem, and he's dancing, and his skirts are flying up, and it's just a little indecency there. But he's doing it as worshiping the Lord. So we'll get there when we get there. Anyways, still he's being humbled though. He's a very serious guy. And Saul takes himself very seriously. So for him to be laid out worshiping the Lord half-dressed, that's like a low blow for him. He's not feeling that. So, okay, that's the chapter. Warned, walled, windowed, and worshipped. And now David's on the run. And this is going to keep going. This is going to keep going on and on. It's going to be pretty epic as David continues to flee and escape with his life as God protects him every step of the way in mercy. So let's end with a few applications of how these things might apply to us here today. First application is sin. Looking at Saul here. Sin demands our obsession. Saul, his whole life is being taken over by his jealousy for David. And he might have some moments of clarity where he swears that he's not going to kill David. He recognizes David's a blessing to him. But those moments are quickly taken over when the passions of sin return and he can no longer think clearly and his will is swept away in the sinful desires. In his case, it's jealousy. And that can happen. But there's a pattern here where all sin does this to us. Sin's not going to be satisfied to just have our partial attention. When we feed sin, it doesn't keep it at bay. If I just give in a little bit, then it'll leave me alone. It grows mightier, stronger, more powerful, and more demanding than ever. Everything you give to sin only makes its hold on you even greater. It's like the Chinese finger trap, whatever. You can't fight against it like that. That's not the way that it works. We need divine intervention. We must be careful of sin in this way. Whether it's jealousy, we considered jealousy more in depth last week, and envy. But any sin is like this, beloved. It's going to demand to take over our lives. Where he's still the king, Saul. He still could be doing the royal duties of his kingship, but he's expending everything, even his own honor, in pursuit of one thing, killing David. Now, let's just imagine, what if he was successful and was able to kill David? Would Saul be free from these sinful desires? They would be stronger than ever. He would find other people around him to be jealous of. It would find others to attach his suspicions to, and he would go on killing and killing and killing until the end of his days. So Don't play around with sin. We must be so careful with it. We have to take it before the Lord. Even the smallest sin can become overbearing in our lives and consume our attention, our thoughts, and it will never pay any dividends. It will never deliver any peace, any joy, any happiness, maybe momentary blessings of that, of its own, but they're not real. So let's take the warning from Saul, lest we too are overtaken by the powers of sin. Saul is an example here for us. What example is that? That if, we can't fight sin on our own. Saul's not above salvation here. If Saul was really repenting, he'd be all good. So when we find ourselves trapped in the snares of sin, we can go to Christ with confidence that He will forgive and that He will set us free. We can go to one another, ask for help, confess, ask for prayer. There is hope in the gospel for sinners that are trapped and for struggling Christians. And that happens to us, yo. We are not above backsliding and falling into these things where they take us over. So let the lesson be learned. Sin, it demands absolute obsession from us and nothing less. So, second application. Personal holiness does not prevent persecution. Personal holiness does. Now maybe you hear that and you think, well, isn't holiness what brings persecution? Yes. Holiness does bring persecution, especially when you have to stand up for truth. If you have to confront somebody, or you have to speak up in a situation for God and His truth, that can bring persecution. But here the note is that personal holiness, and here I'm thinking of David's character, again, towards Saul. David loves Saul. David is kind towards Saul. He's faithful, he's loyal, he wants Saul's good. He really actually does. But that is not enough to save him from Saul's persecuting hand. Our personal godliness in our lives, it's a powerful thing, and it should be one of those things that opens doors for us. For instance, in our jobs, if we're adorned with the character of Christ, and we're in submission to our authorities in the workplace, and we serve well, and when we excel, and we give ourselves to that, and we're loyal, and we're kind, all that, that's going to bless us in our lives. That type of personal godliness, everyone recognizes that as a good thing, But even that is not enough. The nicest, kindest person ever was Christ, and He was crucified. So it's just an important note. Think of Cain and Abel. This is this brotherly persecution going on here with Saul and David. Cain and Abel, similar situation. Abel didn't do anything against Cain. He probably loved his brother. You know what I'm saying? Delighted in his brother. He might not even had any suspicions that his brother wanted to kill him. He was just doing his thing and offering his sacrifice to God by faith. Cain didn't do it by faith, and then took out that rage and jealousy on his brother Abel. When he called him out, come out to the field, Abel just rolled with him. He trusted him. But that was not enough. His kindness to his brother was not enough to save him from persecution. So let us just be aware that, we may be turned on by people, even those people we're kind to, even those people we're faithful to. If the passions of sin take hold, and the passions of jealousy or hatred towards God and His truth take hold, then we're still going to be persecuted, yo. So it's just important to note that. David's personal holiness there. Fourth application, God works on a higher level. So Saul's persecuting David on an earthly level. Saul's got power, he's got authority, he has resources, soldiers, and he sends them to do his bidding. He's got everything on his side. David's got nothing. David's alone here. He's got friends, we see that, but God is working on a higher level to defend David, not an earthly level or really a visible level. God's working on, I'm seeing two different ways in which God is working on a higher level to defend David. First, in His providence. God's providence is basically His chess mastering of life, where he's thinking all the moves ahead and He's got everything in order. He knows what the enemy's going to do already, and He has His pieces in place. Some of the pieces here are Jonathan and Michal. So after David killed Goliath, he gained friends, and those friendships among Saul's children, Jonathan, best friend, Michal, his daughter, his wife, they're working to defend David here. These are providential pieces on the chessboard that are defending David. Jonathan, if you know, he's the one who warned David. David would have been dead. He probably wouldn't have seen the ambush coming. He would have already been dead. Or when they surrounded his house, he wasn't thinking about that, you know. But his wife warned him and let him out. So God always has those pieces in place. David, it seems to me, is living a very simple life. He's trusting God, and he believes God will take care of him. And he doesn't have to go out of his way to blueprint everything. Now, the Proverbs speak this way, that God is a shield to those who walk uprightly, that he watches over the paths of his people. In other words, if we simply serve the Lord in simple obedience to Christ, he's going to provide those defenses above and beyond anything that we've thought of. You maybe can think of examples in your life where God had somebody or something waiting in the wing that helped deliver you out of a certain situation. Whether we do see it or not, though, we know that it's true. This is part of God's love for us, is that he's got it all mapped out. He has a plan and a purpose, and everything will be exactly where it needs to be at the right time. We are the pieces on the board, and he's the chess master. So I think that's a lovely thing there for David, and something that every Christian experiences. Praise God, yo. We don't have to worry about all that, figuring everything out. We can simply obey God, and he's going to work that. Another level that God's working on, a higher level here, is the level of grace. Now, this is not how we would do it. Let's say David was your guy, and you wanted to defend him. You'd probably strike Saul down. Maybe you'd equip the prophets there and give them a few weapons. You know, they all got slings now, and they're dead eyes with it, and they're just going to kill the messengers of Saul. And then when Saul gets there, they're going to kill him too. That's maybe how we would think. God is not thinking like that. God is actually combating that with grace. They're coming to kill David, and God pours out his Spirit upon them and changes their hearts so that they no longer want to kill David. It's a warfare on a deep spiritual level where God is pouring out his love. Now, in the case of Saul, Saul's not saved by this, we know that. But we don't know about these messengers. They're partaking of the Spirit of God and worshiping God. They very well may have been converted as they're seeking to kill David. That's what happened to the Apostle Paul. Now, that Saul was on a mission to persecute Christ. And as he was going forth, God stopped him. Christ appeared to him. And he said, "Who are you, Lord?" He said, "I am Jesus whom you are persecuting," and changed him. Wow. On that very act, and then turned him into one of his greatest servants. That's why they wanted to kill him. Why he had to escape through the window that same time. So, God is amazing, yo. He dispenses mercy and grace to his enemies. And that is his chiefest warfare. Instead of having to fight his enemies on and on, he changes them to his friends. And we don't deserve that. But that is his love. He's not like us. He's gracious. He delights. He digs, showing mercy to rebels. And we see that displayed in these messengers. And perhaps even in Saul. Again, Saul gets this. Saul can't resist it. He's swept up into worship. So know that God is doing that in your life as well. If you have enemies or you have injustices in your life that causes of prayer before God, maybe start praying that instead of God righting that wrong or whatever, maybe he'll save that person, and that will solve it all. What if God shows grace and mercy there, converts them? Then it's a whole new ballgame. And so God's fighting evil, wickedness, jealousy with grace, mercy, and faithfulness. Pretty dope. Last application. He will turn everything to his praise. So these messengers are the instruments of David's destruction. Saul sends them forth to shed blood, and yet God converts them into the organs of his praise. They're now worshiping and acknowledging God. They're repenting of this. They're changing their minds. They see the error of their ways. And they're joining and extolling the Lord and all his mercies. And they're singing with David. David's there too. This is true of every situation in our lives. that God will turn everything to praise. Everything that Satan can throw against us, God will turn to praise in His perfect time, to His own glory, and to our good. God has a way of doing that. And we can trust Him to do that. We might not see how a certain situation might turn out to His glory, but it will. Before the end, He will turn everything to His praise. In fact, in that day, God will bring praise forth from everybody, even the lost, because every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. And that will be praise unto God. If you are not a Christian and you're fighting against God, and maybe you have this sort of idea that you can ambush God, or you can clog up the wheels of His good grace, you can't. Whatever you do against Him, He's going to turn towards His own glory. There is nothing that anyone can throw at God that will not work towards His purposes. So He's the ultimate master. And this is the beauty of David's life, is that he trusts God to be God. This is the Christian call, that we too, through Christ, trust God to be God. And we can live our simple lives in obedience, step by step, serving Him in His mercy and in His grace. So, praise the Lord that Christ and His blood turns all these things true in the gospel. Let's pray.